I've got a wonderful, wonderful microphone. Thank you for that. Okay, let's see if I can get this thing to work. Here we go. Check, 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 check. Okay, I'm getting levels now, so hopefully you can hear me. Anyway, as I was saying, welcome to Side Hustle Ideas. I'm Bill, the company's expert. Thank you for joining me. If you can hear me, and you are a subscriber to my channel, get in the chat box. Let me know what you're wondering, what you're struggling with. This is the weekly live stream where we handle all things entrepreneurial. So if you are wanting to work for yourself, or you aspire to have your own company someday, or you're just looking to get some pointers on how to get a side hustle off the ground, you've come to the right place. That's what we're here to talk about. Thank you for all the people who jumped into the chat to tell me that my microphone wasn't working. I should do this more often. That's probably the way to get a response, right? So thank you for that. Our topic today is MBA for entrepreneurs, game changer or scam. So we're going to cover that. And also we're going to cover what you need to know and the skills you need to have to be an entrepreneur. So it kind of ties in with that. As always, a special shout out goes out to my YouTube channel members and my super thanks donors. You guys are awesome. And my Patreons, and to you, my viewers. Thank you for being here. Peter says, please talk about how to get funding. Why would you want funding, Peter? You see, just hear me out. I'm asking that because on the surface, it sounds insulting and obtuse, but actually, if you think about that question, it reveals a much bigger truth, okay? And that is that the purpose of business is to make money. Now, the problem with a lot of entrepreneurs, especially introverted, technically minded entrepreneurs, of which I've worked with many over the years, one of their big failings is that they don't understand that they're in business. Instead, they view it entrepreneurship or like a side hustle or their own company. They view it when there is a failing. A common failure mode is they view it as a research project. They want to do something technical, whether it's to build an app, build a product, design something, whatever. And they're in it for that. And that's great. That's great. You're in it to solve a technical problem. However, that's not what entrepreneurship is. That's not what a side hustle is. These are business problems, and business is the scientific study of how to make money, and it will fail if you don't make money. And that should be your primary focus. Okay, so if you have no idea how to get money, that might be a big problem. Now, something that I advocate for a lot is that you should be able to start with practically nothing, meaning practically zero money. And I say practically, I mean like $100 or less, okay? And you should be able to generate sales. Okay, now, what that's going to look like, what the one common denominator, one way of doing that is if you have an idea of doing something, say you want to create a product and you think it'll sell, but you're not sure. Okay, what you can do is you can put a message out there and say, hey, I've got this for sale. This is what it does. This is how much it costs. Who wants one? Right? And if you get absolutely zero response, that tells you something. It might not make sense to proceed if that's the response you're getting, because something's not working. It could be a bad idea. It could be you're talking to the wrong people, or it could be you're ineffective at getting the word out. But somewhere along the line, there's a problem. On the other hand, if you put out that message that says, I'm here, I've got this for sale, it costs this much, who wants one? And you get inundated with a lot of people that say, hey, I'll take two, right? That's really cool. Then that's evidence that you're on the right track. And if you decide to proceed with that, you can receive all the startup capital you need to create the first batch of sales, right? So you receive money first, just like when you go to a store and you go to the checkout counter, you pay first and then they give you the thing, right? What do you do when you order something online from like Amazon or whatever? You pay up front and then in several weeks you receive your product, right? So this is exactly the same. You get people to prepay So that gives you the cash up front that you use to buy materials or whatever you need, and then you produce the initial run of products, right? Now, if you can't do that, if you can't get anyone to be interested, even when you've created nothing, even as a pre-sale, you can't get anyone to be interested, that's a problem you need to solve, and money is not the solution, okay? I've seen too many people fall into several traps involved in getting funding. One is they get money and they blow it on stupid crap, and then they still have the same problem. It's just that now that they're in debt, right? The second problem is they spend all their time as founders essentially trying to be treasurers to raise more and more money, and they don't actually devote any real time to working on the product or the thing that they're doing. So I've seen a lot of problems with that. So just beware when you go down that road, okay? Because although it seems like a good thing, and in some cases it is, to get some startup funding, okay, it can very, very easily go awry, okay? And so what I would challenge you to do is try and generate some sales using only what you have now, okay? Even if it's just a promise, even if it's saying, I got this, who wants one? And if you get no responses, you just drop the idea, right? No harm done. If you do get orders, then you take the money and you devote yourself to filling those orders, right? Hopefully that makes sense. So Peter says, thank you, great insight. Okay, well, good. Hopefully that makes sense to you. I've worked with enough entrepreneurs who have received funding and who have not received funding to see the pitfalls of that. I'm not saying funding or if you can get a grant from the government or you could get, there's many different sources of capital, but I'm not saying it's universally bad. What I'm saying is that many times it's an excuse to shield yourself from the actual problem you have, which is you need to sell something of value and make money doing it. And the more you push that away and do other things in the meantime, the worse it gets for you. Okay, so our topic, did I mention the topic? Our topic today is MBA for entrepreneurs is a game changer or a scam. So I'm going to talk about that. And if you guys have any questions, whatever, just jump in, just put them in the chat and we will do it that way. But I wanted to cover this because I keep coming back to this topic. Obviously, as you can see on your screen, I have an MBA course, right? That I created primarily for entrepreneurs, but also this keeps coming up. Every time I get on LinkedIn, for example, when I look at my feed, it's all these people shouting about crap like this. Either they're spouting off on business principles that aren't actually a thing. It's just a made up thing that they've invented and they're trying to pass it off as some kind of cornerstone of business, which it isn't. Or they're debating stuff like this, is an MBA worth it, right? So just to start us off, I wanted to show you guys something. Okay, this is just to get everyone on the same page. What is an MBA, Master's of Business Administration? If you don't know, it's a university degree. It's usually a 2-year degree. It's at the master's level. So usually you take a bachelor degree, like a 4-year degree, then you take a master's if you continue on, which is a 2-year degree. And generally speaking, people with bachelor's degrees, they're grunts. No offense to them, but you're the people that go out and you're told to do actual work, right? You write the reports, and then you bring the report back to an MBA, someone with the master's degree, in theory, at that level, who is actually the decision maker who decides what to do based on the reports. That's totally an oversimplification, but that's the idea. So here's what an MBA is, Master's of Business Administration. Here's what you study. You study a broad range of business topics designed to prepare you for leadership and management roles. Okay, so here are the basic subjects here. So you learn accounting. Okay, you learn finance. Hopefully everybody understands the difference between those two. Accounting is money in the past. Finance is money in the future, right? So accountants answer questions like, where did the money go? What happened? Did we make a profit? Things like this. Finance, they answer questions like, how do we raise money? And what should we do with our money? What's a good investment? What's not a good investment? Okay, so those are sort of the two pillars of studying money, right, directly. Marketing, the scientific study of how to make something popular. Very, very important topic if you're going to be an entrepreneur. Operations. So if you are a company that creates an app, right? The writing of the code to create the app, that's operations. If you're a plumbing company, you'll have an accounting department or accounting person. You might have a finance department or a finance person. You'll have a marketing department or a marketing person. But the actual plumbing that you do with plumbers, that's the operations department. So that's where you deliver the thing that you do. Okay, that's what it is. Human resources. That's everything to do with employees. So not just hiring and firing people, but excuse me, but how to motivate people, how to pay them, labor laws, how you can and can't treat employees, all that kind of stuff, right? Economics, understanding what's going on with the economy in general and how you fit into it. Okay, there's two divisions of that, macroeconomics and microeconomics. Macroeconomics is to do with the larger economy, right? Dealing with how countries operate and stuff like that. And microeconomics is like the economics that apply to just one company. So how you set your pricing and how it affects the quantity you sell and things like this, and how that affects your overall revenue, things like this. Strategy, okay? That's just planning, right? There's different levels of planning. High level stuff, medium level stuff, low level stuff. Organizational behavior. This is actually a really, really cool area if you've never heard of it. It's a little bit of psychology, a little bit of sociology, a little bit of political science, and it's about how people behave in an organization, like how the scientific study, how humans behave, and all the weirdisms that happen, right? All the politics, all the the strange behaviors that, it's kind of unintuitive because for example, you might have heard of someone who works in a company that is not the boss, but yet they seem to have power over the boss. The boss can't fire them, and this person decides whether they follow the rules or not, and they seem to get away with it. You might be thinking, like, that doesn't make any sense. How can they tell the boss what to do? The boss is in charge of them, right? So things like organizational behavior, they'll explain what's actually going on there and why, and how you can fix that or not, depending on what you want to do, right? So very interesting topic. Business law and ethics, okay? So contract law, stuff like that. Ethics, like what's right. Obviously you've got what's legal, and then beyond that, you've got what's ethical, what's right, and how to look at these kind of things. Kind of important for certain industries where they're known for not being super above board. Real estate, things like that. Entrepreneurship, they actually teach entrepreneurship. That's a subject that you learn in business, right? How to spot opportunities, how to exploit them, basically. And technology and innovation management. This is kind of a catch-all for things like innovation and stuff like that. Very, very fascinating topic. At least this is. And there's a lot more. As it says, many programs offer specialization. So you can take an MBA that concentrates in one of these areas or other areas. You can take an MBA that specializes in accounting or specializes in marketing. Personally, I have an MBA that specializes in finance. But you can take a specialization like project management or entrepreneurship. Okay. So that's basically what an MBA is, just so everybody understands. I see Frederick is here, says, what if you fail to fill those orders? What kind of product are you thinking of? Hiring and development is like 70. How do you make fake sales to cover some of the... What are you talking about? Okay, first of all, you don't want to make fake sales, okay? I don't know what that is, but if you're like meaning like falsifying sales or something, obviously you don't do that. Now, how do you fail to fill? Well, listen, let's pretend that you propose something and you're hoping to get like 100 customers, right? This is just to gauge interest and to see if you're doing it correctly, right? And let's say you get 2, okay? 2 people said, I'll buy your thing, right? Now you have a decision to make. Are you going to go ahead and proceed down this path, even though only 2 people are interested when you're expecting 100, chances are that's not enough to prove that it's a valid thing that you should be going and doing, right? Because there's no demand, at least in the way that you're doing it. It's not generating the kind of demand you would need, right? So in that case, you would probably refund the money and say, I'm sorry, there's been a change of strategy, change of direction here. Here's your money back. Sorry for the inconvenience. Best of luck, that kind of thing. This is not about scamming anybody. It's not about lying to anyone. That's what you probably want to do. And you go back to the drawing board and come up with something else that you try and see if you get a better response, right? So that's generally what you would do in that situation. If it doesn't make sense to proceed and try and create this thing, even though you've got some cash, you would abandon that particular version of it and refund people their money. I suppose if you had another idea, you could say, you could try something else, put out another pitch, see if you get more of a response. And then if it's somewhat compatible with your first idea, you could go back to those 2 customers for the first idea and say, well, we don't have that, but we do have this. Are you interested, or would you like a full refund? Something like that. Okay. And I wouldn't hire people at, paying them hourly, or like a salary when you're just starting out. That's not a good way to approach this, right? If you're an entrepreneur and you're starting to create something, like if you're talking about hiring a developer, is that what you mean by dev? Like a software developer? Yeah, the last thing I would do would be to hire a software developer that's just punching a clock to work for you. What you need in the beginning are you need people that will put in a lot more effort and time and care a lot more about what they're doing than some clock punching employee. Okay. You know what I mean? And those people would be the original founders, right? So either you're writing the code yourself or you're writing it with a couple other people and they would be the founders, right? And they're going to go above and beyond what an employee would do. And it's worth their while because if it succeeds, then they don't just get a salary for it. They get ownership of it, right? And if it is successful, they can really clean up. And that's the reason why you would do this. Now, if you can't get them to come on board with that, they don't believe in your idea and they're unwilling to do this, that's a sign you probably shouldn't be partnering with them for this kind of venture. There's a place for people like that in like larger, more established organizations, right? But that's the wrong attitude for a founder, right? That's why there's a difference between the founders and employees, right? And in the beginning, the first few people you get on board, you probably want them to be motivated more like a founder than an employee. Okay. Anyway. So coming back to the whole MBA thing, we talked about what it is. And then there's one other thing I'd like to share with you just to start this off. I went to ChatGPT, not JatGPT. That's a whole different thing. And asked it, is an MBA a good investment for entrepreneurs? Okay, just to get a starting point for our conversation here. And this is what it says. An MBA can be a good investment for entrepreneurs, but it depends heavily on your goals, current skills, and the type of business you want to build. Here's a quick breakdown. Pros: broad business knowledge. Okay, so you'll learn a bunch of stuff. Networking. Business schools often provide access to investors, mentors, and potential customers. No. Yes, theoretically, yes, they do that. In practice, unless you are a sort of extrovert, connected person who is tuned into this stuff, you're not going to get that. You would have to go out and seek that as you would anywhere else in life. If you're not the type of person to be able to get into that world and connect with people and you sort of tune into that, meet the investors, find out what they're looking for, and put effort into it. If you're not that type of person, I would say you're not going to get that going to business school, because it's not like they sit you down in a class and show you. It's like it always is. It's dependent on you of your own initiative, putting effort into doing that stuff. Now you are in the same building that there are professors that can connect you with all kinds of potential angel investors and all kinds of people in industry, if that's what you're looking for. But you still have to go and see them and talk to them and interact with them and convince them of this. So I think it's a little dishonest to be advertising this like this is a benefit that you're going to get, because in the vast majority of cases, I would say people don't get this benefit. Credibility. MBA can boost your credibility with partners, especially in certain industries. Once again, I think that technically, maybe you could say that. I think in practice, that doesn't amount to anything. The only thing that gives you credibility is a track record of success. Just because you have an MBA doesn't mean that you're not an idiot. Just because you have an MBA doesn't mean, you're capable of turning lead into gold. It doesn't work like that. There's a lot of people with MBAs that just don't have a clue about how to generate money or do anything other than work as an employee. You know what I mean? So, all the investors I've ever met in my life, they're not impressed by an MBA. They're impressed by a track record of making money. That's what they're interested in. Very, very conservative mentality, and it has to be. Structured environment. If you learn best in a structured classroom setting, an MBA offers a formal path to developing your entrepreneurial skills. Once again, I think that's crap. I know ChatGPT is saying this, but I think it's kind of the opposite of that. A lot of entrepreneurs, they go out, they pound the pavement, they make connections, they interact with people, and they make things happen. And that, to me, that's kind of the opposite of sitting in a classroom and being taught. It's like the completely converse mentality to this. Cost and time. Top MBA programs can cost $100,000. Yeah, they can. Most of them don't, but they can. A lot of them cost a hell of a lot less than that. But for example, my MBA course is $100. The thing that I always say, the thing that bugged me about this stuff is that a lot of schools, they position this as we're giving you gold here and you need to pay through the nose to get this training. Now, what angers me is that pretty much almost every single thing they're teaching is in the public domain. A lot of it, just like learning something like mathematics, it's been out there for hundreds of years, on average. So charging someone $100,000 to teach you what is already in the public domain, it's already common knowledge, it's out there, to me, that seems like a scam. It's not really a scam, but it feels like a scam. They're charging way too much for it. If you're going to teach someone the math that you would learn in 4th grade, I don't care if Albert Einstein is teaching it to you. Would you pay $100,000 for that? Just because it's Albert Einstein teaching you that? I don't think you need Albert Einstein to teach you 4th grade math. You know what I'm saying? So I feel that there's a bit of dishonesty here. It shouldn't cost anything near this, especially if you're not getting this in the vast majority of cases. So that's what I would say. Not hands-on. Classroom learning is different from the chaos of the real-world entrepreneurship. Some argue that just doing it teaches faster and better. Yes, that's definitely a thing. You're not going to learn you're not going to learn all the theory by just doing it, but there's definitely a lot you're going to learn by just doing it. Risk of overvaluing credentials. Yes, that's a well-known thing. Success in entrepreneurship depends more on grit, execution, and timing than formal education. I wouldn't say it depends more on it, but those are essential ingredients. You need those. And if you don't have those, it doesn't matter how much classroom learning you have. You're not going to get it through classroom learning. So it says, in short, if you're looking to build a venture-backed, scalable company and you need skills and a network, an MBA might be worth it. Yeah, it might be worth it. That's a big might. And if they're charging this kind of money and it takes 2 years of your life, for me, it's a pretty tall order. I would say it would be worth it if you want to go work for an investment bank. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, paying this and taking 2 years, I would say that's pretty dubious. If you are launching a small business or bootstrap startup, the opportunity cost may be too high and direct experience could be more valuable. Listen, direct experience is always going to be valuable. You learn every business by being in it. Okay, so whether or not you have an MBA, you're still going to need experience to really get most things off the ground. It's very hard to look at an industry from the outside and then break into it knowing nothing about how it works and become a fabulous success. It's just pretty damn rare that happens. Usually you learn stuff, you learn how things work in that business by being in the business. So getting in is very important. You could even get in as an employee. You could get hired and work in a company in that business. Look around, learn the business, take advantage of being inside of it. And, then after a year or two, just leave and then start your own business, your own business entity in that industry. That's another formal way in, right? But you're coming in with a lot of skills and you have connections on the inside, right? Kind of similar to what this thing is pushing and saying like, oh yeah, you need all of this. Well, you can get that in the real world. You don't need to take an MBA to get it. That's for sure. Anyway, but there's many different dimensions to this. One thing that I always want to say that people should understand is it's an age-old argument. Do you need business school to be able to do business? Because people like to point to a lot of anecdotal examples, a lot of famous people that happen to be at the right place at the right time with the right skills, and bam, they became billionaires, and tremendous success stories. And the problem is that those stories are anecdotal. And, do your own research if you don't believe me. Look at a more typical experience. A typical experience is that those people tend not to succeed. If all the planets line up in a row and you happen to be at the right place at the right time on planet Earth for something to happen and you were right there and you had a part in it, it looks like you're a genius when you're not. You were just extremely lucky. For most people, what's more typical is that you have the knowledge, then you have the experience, and that leads to success. You need the theory, and then you need the practical experience, and some combination of those two will fully equip you to succeed. And a little bit of luck is usually a requirement too. But I will say one final thing about this, unless I get any questions, and that is that if you're wondering about like, okay, what does an MBA give you? What does the theory give you that practical experience doesn't, and vice versa? Let's get into it, okay? It's probably easier to explain this in the context of a job, okay? Let's say your boss is retiring and you want to take their place. You want to be the one promoted, right? So what you do is, let's say your boss says, I'd like to kind of groom you to be my successor, right? So when I leave in a year, you are ready to step into my shoes and do my job, okay? So I'm going to train you. I'm going to show you my entire job. So you spend a year shadowing your boss. Everywhere they go, you go. Everything they do, you see. And they may be explaining what they're doing while they're doing it, right? So you see how they do their entire job, how they make their decisions, what all their duties are, and why they do one thing instead of another. Okay? So you see that. Then when they retire, you step right into their shoes. You start doing their job just like they would. Bam. No disruption, and you're just as effective as your boss, right? Did you need to go to school to learn business to mimic your boss? No, absolutely not. Now, we see that out in the real world. And what these people then go on to do is they make a logical fallacy. They say, well, because I can just sort of shadow my boss, and then my boss might be a manager, maybe they're running a business unit, and then I step into their shoes, that proves that the education and learning the theory of business is useless. It's not necessary, right? And that's false, because the only reason why they are succeeding is because they are in a mature industry that's not changing very fast. So what worked for your boss 10 years ago works for you now. If you do exactly the same thing, it still works, right? The problem is that let's say your industry changes. New technology, or a new competitor, or new regulations or laws, or some other big change, right? Now, what your boss did and what they showed you how to do, all of a sudden, it starts not working. It turns out to be the wrong decision. Now you start losing money. Now, what you've seen, the only thing you've seen, is no longer what you should be doing. So the big question is, how I need to obviously change what I'm doing. These decisions are not working. What am I missing? What should I do? And that's when the whole thing comes crashing down, because you don't know business theory. You don't know the concepts in place, right? Now, instead of shadowing somebody to learn a job, let's say they hired some baby-faced young 21-year-old kid fresh out of business school. I guess they wouldn't be 21. They'd probably be like 25 or whatever it is, right? They've got a bachelor in something, maybe business, and then they've got a master's of business administration, right? They might not have any real world experience in that industry, right? But then again, in a sense, you didn't either if you had shadowed your boss. You know how to do this, but you don't know how to do anything else. You've never seen anything else, right? So now that things have changed, the person that's never been to school, that just shadowed their boss, the only thing that they can do now is trial and error. They just kind of think, okay, maybe I could do this. Well, let's try it. And they learn by trial and error, by kind of feeling around. Or they use another version of trial and error, which is, let's check in with what other people in my position are doing, and I'll just do what they're doing, right? This kind of groupthink. And that's bad too, because how are you supposed to elevate yourself above the crowd if you're copying the crowd, right? So in a sense, that's not good either, because all the best you can hope for is to do what everybody else is doing and stay neck and neck with them. You'll never be able to pull out in front. Okay? Now, the 26-year-old business graduate, in theory, okay, they might not know anything about the industry, blah, blah, blah. They have a lot to learn in a lot of areas. But in theory, they can walk into the situation, they can assess what's going on, and they know from the theory, in this type of situation, this type of approach is what usually works. So we're going to do that, right? They've never seen it before. They're not copying anyone, but they can find their way out of this problem. They can find a solution because they know the theory of what's going on, right? So that's the advantage that the theory will give you. So they each have their pros and cons. If it's a mature industry, experience wins hands down every time. You might not even technically need the theory. But if it's a changing industry, and all industries are changing to a degree, but if it's changing relatively rapidly, theory will win out every time. So that's what I'll say. Like, that's the value of an MBA. So you try and tell somebody and say, like, an industry like the railroad, which I worked in for the first 8 years of my career, very slow moving industry, extremely slow moving. The way they did business 30 years ago is the way they do business today, and it's the way they're going to do business in 30 years from now. Very slow moving. They don't believe in education. And they have very high level managers, vice presidents that don't have any education beyond high school. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. If that industry ever changes, they are screwed, because the only thing that they have to protect them is essentially the fact that they're a virtual monopoly. But in a lot of fast-moving industries like tech, that's where they care a lot about, at least for business decisions, they care a lot about, having education for that, because it's constantly changing. Let's go over to you guys. The Rarest says grants, I guess that's supposed to be meetings, and how to fund the idea with non-disclosure within that group. Most say not enough money in it for me, but sail a plane, make 100. Sorry, you lost me, The Rarest. You need to learn how to use grammar properly, and this is all one giant sentence, so you lost me. So if you could phrase that in a way I could actually comprehend it, I'll be happy to respond to you if you're asking a question. I don't even see a question in there. I just see a bunch of statements. So let me know. Anyway, so hopefully that makes sense about the whole MBA thing. Now, what I did, just because you can see it on your screen, is I created a course where it's self-study. And it's technically not a course, it's a program. It teaches you like all this stuff, right? You learn all of this. And the way you do that is because you're basically given a reading list. Here's all the textbooks that, you can order from Amazon. They're all available from Amazon. They're the same textbooks. I didn't write them. They're the same textbooks that they're using in places like Harvard Business School and Stanford, places like this, in their marketing course at Harvard in their MBA program, in their marketing course at Stanford in their MBA program. Which textbook are they using? And they tend to use some world-class textbooks written by real experts on each of these topics. So what I'm doing is I'm getting the same book and I'm giving you a reading list. You can order these. You can order like the editions that aren't the very latest edition. The latest edition might set you back like $100 or something. The edition 2 editions old might be like $5, And a lot of these things, all they change is like the pictures and a couple of case studies change. So you're getting essentially the same material. Instead of paying $100, you pay $5, and you read the textbooks on your own terms, on your own schedule. And if you want to skim them, that's fine. If you want to go really in depth and do all the problems, that's fine too. And you get out of it what you want to get out of it, whether you want a real in-depth deep dive or you just want a sort of cursory overview of that topic. That's what you get. Now, for entrepreneurs, they may be interested in 1 or 2 areas and maybe they don't care as much about the others. They might care about something like marketing and possibly finance. Marketing to learn how to sell something and make sales. Finance, be able to raise money or to be able to make sound financial decisions so you don't squander your money, things like this. You know what I mean? If you're a little bit larger and you're producing products, maybe you care about operations management, stuff like this. Maybe you want to go in depth with that. So it really depends like what your situation is, what your passion is. But in my program, I created this thing. I created it so that, whatever your goals are to do with entrepreneurship, you have access to all the information. Now, how deep you go and how thoroughly you digest that material, that's up to you. But you have the option. It's very flexible. And you can do this on your own schedule. You don't have to like go to school for 2 years full time or anything like that. You don't have to take night classes. That's a decision I had to face. You got your job. And then if you're going back to school and night courses, if you have a family, there's no more hours left in the day. That's the challenge I had. So when I got my MBA. So that's why I created stuff like this. And you're not trying to impress anyone with a fancy degree. It's just to learn the material so that you can use it primarily as an entrepreneur to learn how to make money. So that's the idea. So if you're interested in that, just check out the course. There's a link in the description. Other than that, that's kind of what I would say about this topic. Whether it's a scam or not. It's not a scam, but I do think a lot of universities charge way too much for what they're teaching and what you're getting out of it, especially when there's certainly no guarantee that you're going to make all kinds of connections and all this kind of stuff. Even being in class with a bunch of people that maybe their parents own prominent businesses in your town or something, there's no guarantee that that's going to really pay off necessarily unless you have the initiative to go out and connect with these people, and become their friends and do stuff together and really explore that. You know what I mean? It's not just going to be given to you. So depending on your personality type, you may or may not get that. So there you go. And I think that a lot of introverted types, you're probably not going to get that anyway, unless you really put forth a personal effort to do it, to reach out and to engage with this stuff. It's not just going to come by default. So there you go. That's my spiel. There's 22 people here. Thank you for joining me. Get in the chat. I'm just going off questions and comments now. I have nothing more to monologue about. I'm just here to answer your questions. I think entrepreneurship is a great thing. Being an employee and working for someone else has its place. And certainly a lot of people are cut out for that. But there are a lot of others of us that, we want to learn how to transform our value into cash directly without relying on an intermediary, namely an employer, right? A lot of people say, and most of the time it's justified, sometimes it isn't, but they say, I don't want to have to learn how to convert my value into cash. I'm going to let you worry about that. I'm not going to bother to learn that. I'll let you handle that. You're in business. So here's what we're going to do. I'm offering to work for you. You handle the money. I just do the subject matter of what I do, whether I work in operations or something. And you turn my value into money. You make money with my skills, okay? And you take that money and you keep most of it and you give me a tiny fraction, right? And I'll be happy with that. That's what most people say that are employees. But there are people that want to be able to convert that value into cash directly. Now, on your own, it's certainly in the beginning, you might not be able to make the same amount of money. You might be able to make this much money, right? But you keep this much money. It's still a lot more, right? So let's see here. The rarest is going on here. The rarest, English. Response to above, how to get funding. A part of group who have meetings with non-disclosure agreement, helps to share without losing out on the ideal. Middleman, yes, sir. Sorry, the rarest, don't understand. If you're asking me something, I can't detect a question, nor can I understand what you're trying to say there. So if you're asking about how to get funding, I did kind of address that at the beginning of this live stream. Peter was asking about that within the first minute that I went live, and I did respond to that already. So if you're looking for that, just rewind, go back to minute 1 or something of this live stream where I talk about that. But get in the chat if you have questions or you would like to discuss anything. Here to help you out if I can. Yeah, the other element of entrepreneurship that I think is great is that there's a creative side. I always used to get kind of offended when they talk about artists being creatives, right? The creative types. I'm creative, and that always meant you were an artist. And it's like, I was an engineer, and engineering can be damn creative because you are figuring out new solutions to old problems or new problems. You're figuring out new things. You're creating something that has never been created before, a lot of the time. It's a very creative thing. And some of the best engineers are creative people, They can figure out new solutions to problems, Artists don't have they haven't cornered the market on creativity, right? So a lot of us, we might have a creative flair, right? You want to do your own thing. You see a problem out in the world and you say that this is ridiculous. I could create a better solution to this, right? Now, if it's something that people would pay for, that can be an entrepreneurial venture, right? You solve some kind of problem, you fill some kind of need or some want, right? There's a creative element to this too. And if you work at a job where, you're at the worker level, or maybe even at the professional level, but you're in a situation where, you don't get to decide what you do. You're just sort of following orders all the time. Other people tell you what to do and you do it. From a creative perspective, it's very unsatisfying, right? Now, you can spend your whole life doing that. And hey, if you make a decent living, right on. Nothing wrong with that. But from a creative point of view, it's like if you feel you have something to contribute, you have a better solution to something. There's this thing that would solve this problem that doesn't exist, but I know how to create it. That's really good motivation to learn entrepreneurship. That's something you could do. You could say, I'm going to go into business on my own. I'm going to produce that thing. And if you're correct about, people wanting it and you know how to sell it, then you can make your fortune and you could potentially make more money than working as an employee, just as a grunt at the worker level or something. You know what I mean? So that's the other kind of really cool thing about entrepreneurship that I like. And like I always say, side hustles are a great way to kind of dip your toe in the water of what entrepreneurship is, without quitting your day job, without taking huge risks. You just sort of try and do something on the side. If you have a hobby, some people try and turn their hobby into a entrepreneurial, whatever the word is, entrepreneurial venture, where they can make money doing their hobby. Who wouldn't want to quit their day job if you can make just as much money, turning your hobby into a money-making venture, right? And you get to spend all your time doing that, and you're passionate about it, The Rarest says, you helped awfully a lot already, sir. Okay, well, great. Well, thanks, The Rarest one. Thank you for saying so. I'm glad that this stream is helping you out. It's a tremendous thing. So one last chance. Get in the chat. Let me know if you have any questions about the whole MBA thing or entrepreneurship or anything else, and I will do my best to give you a hand, help you out, if that's what you're looking for. As I said, while I'm waiting for the questions to come in, check out that course, the $100 MBA. I've sold quite a lot of that. It's actually a pretty popular course. A lot of people have taken it, which is really great. I believe in the knowledge. I believe in learning these skills. If you understand how to turn your value into money directly without going through an employer who will skim so much off the top, they will pay you this much if you generate this much, right? They'll keep the rest. Some of it is justified. They do play a part in the process, fair enough. They also keep back some money because of the volatility, right? They guarantee you that they're going to pay you a certain amount of money no matter what their sales are doing, right? You get the money for coming to work. So you're shielded from the uncertainty of the business in a way, right? So that's part of the reason that they hold back a lot more, right? But still, they hold back a lot more than that can be justified a lot of the times. So the fact that you don't know this, that you don't understand this, like the MBA material, which is how to make money. It's a scientific study of how money is made. If you don't understand it, in a way, it's like hurting you your entire working life because you're generating this much value, but you're only taking home this much value. You know what I'm saying? So it will also help you in a conventional job. If you understand business decisions and how to make more money, you can be a manager. You can make decisions that will help the company make more money. That's the whole point. Knowing this is good, right? Whether you're on your own or you're working for an employer or you're in a smaller company that you joined or something, in any situation, it's useful. That's why I created the course. I want it to be available to more people. I think it's stupid how a lot of universities, they act like gatekeepers of this knowledge. They say, you can't learn this unless, you pay $100,000 and then you take 2 years full time where you have to go to their building to be taught this stuff in a classroom, And I just think that okay, for some people, that's fine, but not for everybody. That doesn't work for everybody. Alexa Kent says, around how long is each video in your course? Okay, so if you're talking about this course, I've got 3 courses, they all work differently. But if you're talking about this course, the one I've been talking about or mentioning a couple times, the way it works is, like I said earlier, you get a reading list. You get the textbooks that they use in places like Harvard Business School in their MBA program. So if you're taking the marketing course, you will, just like you go to any university course, you'll usually get a textbook, right? And you read the book. And a lot of times, especially these days, and I know this because I went back to academia for a few years, professors are being lazier and lazier. They're sort of teaching a course out of a book. So you order a book. It comes with all the tests and exams and assignments and all the answer keys for everything and all the lesson plans. And then you teach the entire course out of a book, like a paint by numbers kind of thing, right? Anyway, so you go to Stanford, you go to Harvard Business School, you go to Yale, you go to various famous business schools, right? Like we're in Canada, where I am, you have Ivy Business School. And you look at like what textbook they're using in those programs, right? You can order that book on Amazon, right? You could just order it and read it yourself. So what you're getting from me for $100, which is not very much, is you're getting a reading list, okay? And because it's a course, but it's also really a program. It's like all these things, right? Like you're learning all of these, and each one in a university program would be a separate course with its own textbook, right? So what you're getting is the reading list, and then what I'm doing is I'm providing you videos with each course. So the main learning is going to come from the textbook. That's where the learning is. You're getting it from the same source as these universities. And what I'm doing is I'm guiding you through it. I'm giving you an overview of the material. So there's one video on that. And then I'm also giving you my personal opinions on like which part is useful, which part is less useful, based on my career and being a CEO and stuff like that, is I'm giving you that for what that's worth. But the real learning is going to come from you reading the textbooks. You could skim it, or you could go in depth and do all the problems and get the answer key and do it that way. But different people will have different interests and different needs. And the real advantage is you can do this on your own schedule. So depending on how many hours you have free per week, you might only have 2 hours a week, to do this kind of thing. But you can still do it. And you can do it on your own schedule. So I don't know if that answers your question. Hopefully that makes sense. It's not really based on the videos. There's a few videos there. And you can see that if you follow the link. It'll show you how many hours worth of videos in the course. But you're getting basically those 2 videos per subject. And then you would learn it by reading the book. So hopefully that makes sense. The Rarest says, I'm coming up on first meeting of entrepreneurs for the Mingle. Any idea of what I should expect from this odd meeting style? I'm not sure. Like, it's a meeting of entrepreneurs. Is that an app or something? Mingle? I've never heard of that, so I don't understand kind of what you're describing. If you could let me know, please, the Rarest one, then I can speak to that. Alexa Kent says, yes, the MBA. Yes, that answers my question. That makes sense. Thank you. Okay, great. So, yeah. But no, I created that. There's 4 types of people that take that course. One is entrepreneurs, okay, or aspiring entrepreneurs. The other one are people that have regular jobs, right? They're working in usually large organizations that are trying to climb the ladder. They're trying to get promoted to being a manager or, something like that, a director. And they don't have any business training, right? They might have technical skills in a certain area. And as you climb the ladder, there's several things you have to add on, okay? One is certainly people management skills. Another one is more advanced communication skills. And then a third one, depending on what level you're going to, what the nature of the role is certainly financial skills, right? Because the language of business is money. You talk money, right? When you talk about things you've done, you talk about it in terms of the financial impact it had. What are we talking about here? Right? So being able to understand, like you can look at, for example, your 4 main financial statements and be able to look at them and just be able to tell what's going on with the business entity, right? Things like that. Knowing finance, understanding like the time value of money and how to make financial decisions about like, should we do this with our money or do this, like option A, B, or C? What makes sense financially? How to calculate the risk on it, and the potential return, and being able to defend that, right? So you have that to back up decisions. So, usually you have to tack on at least financial skills at some point. You can't be like a general manager without understanding anything about money or anything about accounting. So do you have to get an accounting certification? No, but you at least have to be financially literate, right? So that's one of the things that people have to add on if they want to get promoted up beyond a certain point, right? So this will give you that for very cheap. You still have to put in the work, right? And you don't get any sort of accredited credential because there's no did I mention that? There's no evaluations in my course. That's intentional. So people can skim it if they want. Or if they're learning all of this stuff, and maybe they don't need to learn, they're not interested in human resources, they're not interested in economics, and they're not interested in, say, business law and ethics or something. They don't really feel like taking a course or reading a book about that. You don't have to. If you just are in it to learn, accounting and marketing or something, and that's all you're interested in, you can do that. It's very flexible. Okay, so the Rara says it means to mix in with people, with a group of people. Oh, you mean so actually mingle. So yeah, it isn't a meeting. It's kind of just a get together, right? It's an event where you're mingling. You're going to be in the same room or whatever with other people. So what you're asking about, it seems, is you're asking about sort of conversational skills, right? You want to approach somebody, you don't know them. You want to say, hey, how's it going? My name is Bill. It's great to meet you. Maybe you exchange business cards, right? And you engage them in conversation where you learn a bit about them. You make them want to talk to you, right? Make them enjoy speaking to you. And that kind of paves the way to see if there's any potential to work together in some capacity, right? Those are kind of the things I think you're referring to, those type of skills. Now, I don't know if this is 100% relevant, but, since I was talking about a course now, that course teaches people a bit of networking, like how to get a job on the hidden job market. So you may be interested in learning that. That might help you with some of that, because if you're trying to get things like informational interviews, it's a lot of the same skills. How to reach out to someone, but then once you meet in the same room, they request that you come and talk to them. Right? Once you get face to face with them, what do you say? Right? So that might help you if you're looking for that. I also have this. This is basically teaching you advanced communication skills, like to be a manager and stuff like that. So that it's part of that too. That course is called Write Like a Professional. It does center around writing, but I mean, it's basically about what to say, what to communicate. That's the critical part. But just because you're here, I mean, just to give you the basics of it, it's really not that hard. What you want to do is you want to go up to somebody and, I don't know this meeting you're describing. I'm not sure what the dynamic is of that meeting, but if it's a sort of, almost like a wine and cheese kind of event, that a lot of people will go to, a lot of business people will go to these things. And, if you're more extroverted, this is the type of networking you do. I don't do that kind of networking, but I've had to go to a few of those things. I find them very inefficient, to be honest with you, because you got a room full of people, and in an hour and a half, you could maybe talk to about 5 of them. You know what I mean? So it's very inefficient. But the idea is, you introduce yourself, you shake hands. I'm not sure if that's cultural all around the world, but everywhere I've been, you do. You introduce yourself. It's good to have an elevator pitch. If you've never heard of an elevator pitch, that's a good thing to have. It's just summarize your whole self in 5 sentences. This is me. This is what I do. This is what I'm looking for. That kind of thing. What I used to do is I wouldn't say what I'm looking for. I would just say, this is who I am. And then I'd jump to simply asking them questions about themselves, right? Instead of the basics of this, instead of telling them all about you, which no one will be interested in if you're a stranger, okay? Instead, you ask them about them. What are your opinions on this? What is your background on this? What do you do? What's your job? How does that work? Right? That kind of thing. And then what I do is I shift very quickly to, what's your opinion on this? Where do you think we're going here? What do you think the future holds for this? Should we do it this way? Should it be done that way? Should it be done? Why do you say that? You know? And then they explain, right? And then they tend to really care about saying what they think about stuff. They find that very enjoyable and they find it very interesting, and they tend to get into it, right? And if you can sort of get them to do that, that does a couple of things. First of all, it makes them love you. If they think that you're like genuinely interested in what they think about what it is that they do or that industry or something, you know, they'll eat that. They'll love that. You know, they'll welcome the opportunity. They find it very flattering. It's also good for you because you get to learn about like what they're doing in their occupation, right? And some of it might be very interesting, and you get to learn a bit. Here's a real expert on whatever it is, telling you all about it. You know, it's a good thing. It's a learning opportunity. And then if they mention something that like you kind of care about, that, you know, you have an interest in, you can kind of steer the conversation towards that. See what they think about it, see what approach they take, you know, and what's their attitude towards it or what they feel is the way forward. You know, and then if you have something that like, you know, you have also opinions that line up with theirs, you know, or you're proposing to do something, you're thinking about maybe do something, then you have the option of possibly towards the end telling them that, saying, that's great that you said that because I think that too. You know, in fact, I was toying with the idea of starting up something and that, you know, whatever. And then sometimes that can lead to opportunities. They say, oh, well, listen, if you do get that off the ground, you need to come and talk to me because, like, you know, I've been looking for someone that can do this, you know, to partner with or, you know, whatever. Right. Okay. So that's kind of the deal with how to sort of connect, you know, possibly make something happen in that type of situation. Right. It's very similar to an informational interview. A lot of informational interviews that I've done, they've gone like over an hour, well over an hour. And that's where the good stuff is. You know, after the first hour, then people start really opening up. They let their guard down. They give you their honest thoughts about stuff that they normally wouldn't share. That's where the real value is. For these kind of like, almost like wine and cheese kind of parties, you don't have an hour and a half to talk to somebody. You have maybe 5 minutes. So you've got to do a sort of compact version of it. But the idea is that the number one goal should be to leave them thinking, wow, I enjoyed talking to that person. You know, I was getting into it. They asked me about something that was really interesting, which is usually all about them and what they do. And you leave them liking you and wanting to interact with you more. That's the key. Okay? So that's what I would say about stuff like that. There's all kinds of ways to network. Now, I'm an introvert. A lot of people on YouTube are introverts, and I cater more to that. That's what I talk about in that course, by the way. That type of networking, you know, where you do all the connection and all that kind of stuff, like, you know, online, and then you go for a face-to-face meeting when they've invited you down to come and meet with them. You know, they want to talk to you, right? So I favor that approach. Now, a lot of extroverted type people, what they'll do is they won't do any of this. They'll stay off social media and they'll just go to events, and they'll always be out like at events and like meeting people and stuff like that. You know, you can do that. I find it exhausting. I don't like it, but a lot of other people do it. It's fine. It achieves the same result. The rarest says, thank you. I was not sure how to present myself without funding, but I'm a very deep thinker when it comes to my money-making ideas. Just want to be taken seriously just once a day. Well, listen, you know what you could do, rarest? I mean, it might be an option for you. I don't know what situation you're in, but something that, you know, you could do is when you talk to these people, okay, first of all, don't mention funding. Don't mention you're looking for funding. Don't mention anything about that stuff, okay? And then if anyone asks you, you say like, listen, I'm not really here trying to get funding, like trying to get capital, you know, for my startup or something. What I'm more interested in is trying to connect with people that actually really know this industry, you know, that really have, they could really lay down for me how everything works, and they're maybe connected to all the big players in this industry. You know, that's what I'm really looking for. Almost like an angel investor, but without the funding, more like a mentor, a really good contact, possibly something that could, has the potential maybe in the future to turn into some kind of partnership, but that's not really what I'm thinking about now. I'm just looking for someone that's like in this industry, that's a player that understands it, that can help me navigate it. That's what I'm looking for, right? And people will probably find that very disarming because you're not trying to get money. You're not like in it to try and get that. You're here just to legitimately connect to people, and listen to what they know about it, and so that's kind of the approach I would recommend. You will also get a lot more enthusiastic reception if you take that attitude. Usually the moment you mention funding, unless it's like a fundraiser or something like that, usually that's a total turnoff, because people go, I see what's going on. You're not interested in me. You're just here to get money. Okay, so what's this? $100,000 a few months ago, I'll be making $12,000 a month with $7,000 note, an apartment. Okay. Yeah. Okay. Whatever. Anyway, so that's what I have to say. Any last questions? Get in the chat. In about a minute, I'll be winding this down, unless I get inundated with questions or something. But yeah, if you are interested in being an entrepreneur, learn business. Business is the scientific study of making money. Obviously, I have a course for that, if you want to learn it with me. But, you need a combination of sort of business theory of how everything works, plus experience. You try stuff. You learn something within a particular industry. You learn how it works. What does it take to sell something? What does it take to convince customers? Who are your customers? You're not going to know that without having investigated it, right? So when you investigate it, you learn, like, I'm going to try and go to these people. I'm going to try and say this. Does that work? No, it doesn't. Okay, well, maybe what am I getting wrong? Am I saying the wrong thing or am I going to the wrong people? Let's figure this out, right? So you've got to solve those problems one way or another. And there's no substitute for trying it. You know what I mean? So that's why you need experience. And the more things you try, the more things you propose, right? The closer you are to stumbling upon a winning formula. I'm offering this thing. I'm talking to these people about it, and I'm convincing them this way, right? That triad of things. You just hit upon the magical combination that's like, okay, all of a sudden there's demand. People are opening their wallets and saying, here, take my money. Now give me that thing that you said you could do, right? Then the only problem you have then is, can you produce it? And that's a lot simpler problem usually than can you sell it, especially for technical people. Okay, well, we're going to sign off. Thank you to the 22 people who are here. You guys are awesome. I wish you every luck in the world, especially with business stuff. I'm here every Monday, same time, to answer questions about entrepreneurship or business, if people have them. And I will be back live this afternoon in just under an hour. I've got a collaborative live stream with another YouTuber the live stream will be going out on my channel and on hers. Her name is Abby, and she's from the YouTube channel Life Work Balance. And we're going to be answering sort of job search questions together. So you get her perspective as a recruiter, you get my perspective as a manager and company owner, all together. So I do this every two weeks on a Monday. So we're going to be doing that today. So stick around for that. Otherwise, I will see you next time on Side Hustle Ideas. You take care.